session of Irish History from the Hedgerow at the Irish Roots Cafe, produced by IrishRoots.com with Peter Riley Adams and Michael O'Loughlin. Find a spot on the warm, sunny side of the hedgerow now. Today's session is about to begin. They were rough, unpolished men, brilliant scholars, teaching by the side of the road, in small rooms, in nooks and crannies, wherever and whenever possible. Such men as these, they were the teachers of the hedge. We're really about 2 years in front of that big battle that's coming up, and you can see what's happening. There's still continued battle between the province of Leinster and Dublin, where the Vikings are, against Brian. They keep trying to revolt. And now the Clan Owen, or the Eugenians, you might read it in later day works, which of course were the Donohues down there around Loch Lane and some of their allied families, they're starting to rise in power. They're starting to rise up. They've got a lot of men, and they're going to play a role in this battle too. Brian, meanwhile, sees war's coming, and he's starting to consolidate power, so he's building up his fortresses in County Clare, or the old province of Thomond, or the division, they called it Thomond before County Clare was actually an entity. And then in 1013, you've got MacShanel retreating, the fighting continues, and in 1013, again, Brian moves on to Dublin, and he's blockaded until Christmas, and he thinks, well, I'm going home. So he goes home, but everybody knows he's coming back. This is the climax of Irish history to this point, and the Norse of Dublin then rallied, the entire province rallied to Sitrick, the king of Dublin, and Sitrick then went to the Orkneys, the Isle of Man, and they also sent emissaries, they say, all the way back to the homelands, Norway and those areas, and he gained ships and support of several Norse leaders. And do you know what they say in some of the Viking annals, Peter? This is really interesting, that he actually, it seems like it was he that promised, but he at least said that Gormla would join with two separate Viking leaders if they fought. Now, he told them separately, and you can have Gormla and all her power, influence, and wealth if you fight in this battle and we triumph.
He did. He promised his mother.
That's right. Isn't that interesting?
And of course, giving away. It's like, what is it? Which today it still exists in some cultures, where the male is the one who decides who the female marries. But in this case, it seems that it even passed to him. But he was a king in his own, a leader in his own right, so he could do that. And he could even give away his mother.
The king's mother. But, there might have been some intrigue there, because even if both of them survived, they would have to fight each other off, which would have further weakened his opponents, his Viking opponents, either though they were of his own clan, so to speak. So I think there's some deep politics might have been going on there.
And the treachery is also amazing, of father against son, mother against son, brother against brother. And there's mention, of course, of a few other of the women, but they're only shown as because they were part of the barter.
Well, and now the things are really shortened up. He's gone out there and told everybody, be there on Good Friday. That's when it's going to happen. So Brian then got some troops from the province of Connaught, which helped him. And, of course, Munster troops. He had plenty of Munster troops behind him. But the North stood down. They didn't fight on either side. So they were just watching. They were going to watch Brian get considerably weakened no matter what happened, I think. And he had the support of MacShanel, but they think MacShanel might have left, but then they think it might have been Brian's people writing history after it happened to try to denigrate the king of, I think that was Meath. And so Brian now is marching to Dublin, and his son Doncad is attacking the province of Leinster as a diversionary tactic, raising havoc through other areas, trying to draw some of the forces away from the main battle scene. And a battle takes place on Good Friday, April 23rd, 1014. And they say the two opponents were about equal, and they battled the whole day with heavy losses. The Norsemen, they even said they had 1,000 men in mail, heavy mail, full metal, and they said the Irish don't stand a chance. The Irish are just there in silken shirts. How can they stand against men in full male battle? What do you think about that, Peter?
Well, that's true. There was also a legend that the Vikings had, or that they thought of, that Thor, who was their god, and the priests, the prophets, said, you need to fight him on this day. Brian was able to, because Brian learned the tactics of the Vikings. He learned how to go around it. And once you learn their if you learn the tactics of your opponent, then you have half won your battle. And so what they wore became less important as how you dealt with what they had. The use of the axe, which the Irish didn't use, but the Vikings taught them, and so they were using it. But in the legend that comes down, that the priests of Thor, of the Vikings, said, you must battle him on this day. It's a holy day for them, but if you battle him on this day, you will kill him. He will die on that day. Brian didn't want to fight on Good Friday. He said, I do not like having to fight on this holy day. Now, I find it, if we can add a little other history here, I'm amazed. It's April the 23rd. In 1916, with the rising of the Irish against the invader, the Normans, the Anglo-Saxon Norman British, was Easter Sunday. They didn't rise on the 24th of April, on the 23rd of April, because it was Easter. So they rose on the 24th, Easter Monday. I find it very interesting. 1014, Good Friday, the Great Battle of Dublin. 1916, April 24th, the battle in Dublin. The new rebels rise against the foreign invader.
Well, I think there's a deep sense of ethnic history at work there. It's more than just coincidence.
When I see the comparisons, to me, it's absolutely magnificent. And you think, what does the legend, what does the history say Brian wanted to do? Brian wanted one Ireland. Ireland for Ireland. Get the invader out. Charles Parnell, he wanted home rule. The Irish for the Irish. We'll make our own decisions as one. Patrick Pearse, James Connolly, Thomas Clark. We want Ireland for Ireland, one Ireland. And then the division, the North and the South. Ulster, 6 provinces of Ulster versus the rest of the nation. We want the invaders out. The similarities of thought that were there, it looks, for 1,000 years. You know, the English came in 800, so they are looking at it in 800. They really came, or the Normans came, and then by 1100, when the English, whoever they are, came in and started taking over things, through the King of England having been given the advice by the Pope to go and help straighten out that Irish church for me. They actually occupied, the British did, until 1923 at the end of the Civil War. And what you had is that the British could finally leave after 700 years of dominance. They got that, but they still have the dominance to this day. They have the dominance in the northern part. Well, the Irish only wanted it for the Irish. Now, another similarity that has plagued me in some sense is Brian kept saying, well, you're a half-breed. You're Norse, you're Irish, but you're Irish, aren't you? Well, what do you want? Do you want to be Irish and rule this land, this island that we're sitting on? Today, the people in the North, you're Irish, aren't you? Your families have lived here for how long now? Since they started coming in the 1700s with the ascendancy, but you're Irish, aren't you? How can you not want to be Irish? To become as Irish as the Irish? Many of them did. But England is still going to rule. And that's what the same questions, the same arguments live today as lived when Brian Boru was trying to drive everyone out and assimilate the counties, the provinces, the kingships of Ireland under one. And it's almost like it wasn't under me that I want this. It's not for Brian Boru. It's for Ireland. Ireland to be one.
Yeah, it's really interesting to look back between the Vikings that arrived in 795 and the Normans that arrived in 1169, both starting their incursions. The story is amazing. And I wonder, there's one more story, and the similarities between both the Irish annals and the Viking annals tell us that there's truth to it, because they're just too similar. And of course, they both point the blame at Gormla, that famous Irish woman we talked about earlier. But basically,
who also bore Brian Boru a son. And actually, that son, he would have been really the only Irishman, because Gormla was Irish and Brian was Irish. His sons, were they Irish? Was it a Norse? We don't know. I mean, I guess they say they do, but they even had to at times make up names because they didn't know the name of his first wife. Really. But Gormleth they know about.
Yes, it's that unclear. Well, this story, according to the Irish side, we'll just start with that. Brian demanded some tribute, and he told of Gormla's son, who was the leader of the province in Leinster. He said, I want 2 or 3 masts of fine wood, and I want them brought to me and carried and erected by you. That'll be your tribute to me as your overking, so to speak. And so they brought it there, and there was some kind of squabbling between some of the clans that were carrying it, and I think it sounded like Malmorda, the king of the province of Ulster, the Irish king, and he decided that the way I've seen it told several different ways, but the one story I read said that the one clan wasn't going to pick up that thing and load it for the final move, but that upset him so much that he just, even though he was wearing his fine cape with the brooch.
He was Gormleth's brother.
Yes, that's right.
Which is also interesting. And so, he's wearing this fine cape, and they're moving the tribute that he's bringing to Brian.
Right.
Okay? And then apparently it wasn't going fast enough. And Mormont gets out, get out of the way, let me show you how to do this. And he gets in and he's pushing with his shoulder, but he's wearing this fine coat, which was a gift from Brian
himself.
So it was a poor judgment on him but he's wearing it because look how high I am. And when this happens, he tears it, or he loses the silver button.
Right.
And so he's all upset about this happening, but he picks it up and he restores, hopefully to keep the button, to have things fixed after he gets to see Brian, because that's where he's on his way to Brian.
Right. And then he takes that cape to his...
He takes the cape to Gormleth. And he says to her, and this is I was actually laughing, and when I think about this, that he says to her, he throws it to her. He says, here, woman, sew this. Fix this for me. And she said, oh, this is the one Brian gave you. You treat him with such disrespect that you do this to this beautiful garment. Fix it for me. She picks it up, throws it in the fire.
Well, and I heard that she had said, what are you doing out there doing the manual labor with these clans that are supposed to be working for you? She says, pretty soon you'll be doing menial labor for Brian Boru's son. Is that what you want to be? I'll have no part of it. And she tossed it into the fire.
And I guess she also, it's, as legend is, she said, I can't sew. That's not what I am.
I don't do sewing.
I don't do it.
Well, and then apparently on this set the stage for an argument later. So apparently on that same trip, there was a chess game. And this chess game appears in the Viking annals and in the Irish annals.
In both,
yes.
Yeah.
And so the game, now they have different players, but it's always Brian's son is one of the people playing the chess game. And sometimes it's a bishop or an ecclesiast or someone, but he's in battle with another man. And the way I heard it was that the king of Leinster, who had the torn cape, gave a clue to Brian's son's opponent. He said, move your piece there and you'll win, and he won. So this made Brian's son very mad.
And I've read the story that said he gave the advice to Brian's son, and he did the move, and he lost. So that he's saying to Marmarth, what do you think this is? Oh, your strategy and about the battle you mentioned
Oh,
before.
that's right. And somewhere in there came, he says, well, if you would have been this smart at the Battle of Glen Mama, then we would have done all right. And that was another great battle we talked about earlier. And because of that battle, there was quite a bit of talk. But it was a great insult starting to be hurled. And it wasn't from the king. It was from the son of the king against another king that Brian was honoring, and he was bringing tribute to Brian. So it cost him very hard feelings. And from that point, he went back to Dublin, the King of Leinster did, and from there the plot was hatched. And of course, the annals say that Gormla is the one that said, "By gosh, you better do something." And the whole thing exploded from that point. He went to the islands and asked for his. There weren't enough Vikings in Ireland to give battle to the whole power of Brian.
I understand too that Brian sent his son to go apologize, because
Yes.
he said, "You should apologize, Brian." And Brian said, "I'm not apologizing. I am not going to betray my son. Yeah, he made a mistake. I know it. But I'm not apologizing to him. Let him go and apologize." And he sent him after him.
Yes.
Go,
yes.
go fight. And it sent the younger son,
Yeah.
Cormac.
Now, and I heard that he had sent a writer. They didn't name the name, but they said whoever they sent. He said that the King of Leinster then took a switch and switched him across the head and cut him and hurt him badly, so he had to be carried back by friends, and that he was that enraged, which makes things just so much worse.
And I've also that he killed him.
Oh,
and that was an incident at which Brian told Gormlaith to go packing.
And
it's time for you to go.
You can almost see if a person was a strong supporter of Brian, how the story develops. It's that he just didn't hit him across the face. He killed him. So you don't know what might have been the truth here.
And, of course, they want to, like you said, to advance the cause of Brian. So the story becomes, it's, and we've all heard the kind of the story that, oh, my God, first of all, you get a slight cut on your finger, so you go for a Band-Aid, and somebody else heard that you were at the store getting something to patch up a wound, and that wound went from being a slight cut that you hit it on a piece of paper to you losing your finger, to it expanding, then to you lose your arm, to expanding, then that you're dead.
Yes, that's
so
exactly
these stories, as they grow over the years, and especially for you think about the storytellers who went from place to place. The Shonashik in Ireland went from place to place telling stories. Now, I've been teaching in my life for more than half of it.
Yes.
And when I was teaching communication, I used to send students in the hall, and I'd take two in the hall with myself, and I would tell a story to the two of them. I would then send one student back in the room and said, "You just sit here and wait." Then I would get another student, send them into the hall, and have the other student relay the story. And then I would keep switching students until all of them were gone. And then I would ask the last student who heard the story to tell the story, and then the person who had heard it the first time to tell the story. They weren't even close. So as time goes, as different hearing occurs, facts get mingled, because memory gets mingled. And if I can't, and the Irish are great at this, and having been in Ireland as many times as I have, I've discovered the storytelling is one of the greatest arts in the world. And if I get to a particular position, and I've done it myself, if I really can't remember exactly what it is, but I have to say something, maybe I should make it up.
Oh, that's right. And that's why the oldest written record is probably the closest you're going to get to the truth, and you have to consider who wrote it.
Well, I like the fact that we have both the Irish account and the Norse account. That, of course, then gives us an opportunity to look at all the facts that as they are presented and then come to a hopefully objective conclusion as to what is really true.
Boy, this is bringing us right up to that fateful day, the Battle of Clontarf on Good Friday, April 23rd in the year 1014. And on one side would stand the King of Leinster and the Vikings. And, of course, they'll end up being killed. And the two sons of the king of the Vikings, they also commanded forces. And on the other side was Brian and the nobles of Munster, Connaught, and Meath. And Brian's son Murchagh commanded. And, of course, he would be dead by the end of the day. Well, and the Vikings say that the whole battle, took 3 days, and the Irish are very specific and say it started at sunrise and ended at sunset. But, these guys were running at quite a bit of speed, and it would have taken a couple days to do mop-up action at least, and they'd be hiding in some of those little spots that you can't find. And they were running towards ships that weren't easy to get to, and there might have been some people blocking their way. So it could have been 3 days, according to the Viking annals, in that aspect.
Well, and the starting up and the finish and the cleaning up, in a sense. Now, Dublin, if any of our students have been to Dublin, the River Liffey, or is the river throughout Dublin, and goes into Dublin Harbor. The Viking settlement was on the south part of the Liffey. Imagine that's where they are. Now, if you go to the north side of the Liffey, that's where there was the woods and things. But you go also to the west. Now, if we're talking modern-day Dublin, or where downtown is our center city, there's also that some of the battle took place further down the west. I have to know exactly where the Viking settlement was, but some of the battle took place, they say, in what is today known as Phoenix Park. And I've walked these from Phoenix Park into Center City all along the Liffey. And the Liffey, of course, you could bring your boats up. Your army would stay there as the settlements are. And it's probably a 2.5-mile walk. So if we put the battle in that spot and say, here's where it occurred, you have to understand what were the enforcements that they each had. Brian's coming from one point, but he's on the land. But there's another river, and there's the woods. They're hiding in the woods. They're putting their settlements. They're building their tents. But the Vikings were right at the river, and that was important for the Vikings because, remember, they were mostly a sea people.
And then as the battle took place, the Vikings, or the Norsemen, they were being slaughtered. And, of course, the Irish took heavy casualties, too. It's hard to tell what the numbers were, but thousands for sure, you can say. Now, what happened as the Vikings were retreating? They had been defeated, and they were retreating, and the Irish were in fast pursuit. And I think some of Brian's bodyguards must have left his tent and went after him to make the final kill. Now, what happened then is Brian's sitting there at his tent after a day of victory, and the sun must be starting to set, and the Vikings are fleeing. Do you know what happened then?
They say that Brian was praying, and he was happy, but his son had been killed. We haven't mentioned Brian's flag of the 3 lions. And it had fallen, and his son had been killed. And Brian was like, how can I rejoice so much because I have lost my son? But no one was there guarding him because they thought they would win. There was no reason to worry. He sent others away. That's okay. You go find out what's going on and bring back the news. But the Vikings are on the run. But Brian may have been in his tent, and he may have been praying. He may have been mourning what had occurred. And Brodar, the leader, one of the leaders in the Vikings, it said, came to the tent and realized, and he was on the run too. I mean, he was trying to save his own life, and he discovered there's Brian. And there's 2 stories. One, of course, that he went into the tent and they realized who each other was, and they fought. And it says Brodar used his club and hit Brian in the head. And Brian, using his sword, rammed it into Brodar. And it says, and the 2 laid as their blood mingled. What an analogy, huh? What a whole little notion, the blood mixed. Because what had happened with the Irish and the Norths, and who became one, or is anybody really pure here? One story says that Brodar killed Brian, and that was how Brian Boru died. Another story says that Brian Boru killed Brodar and then killed himself.
Oh, now that's one that I haven't really broached. I wouldn't buy that one. A man like Brian Boru be killing himself?
Well, again, I wondered about that, and I wondered about all the history we've heard, but think of it. Brian's an old man. He cast out his wife. He gave his favorite daughter to Cedric, and now his heir son and his sons have been in this battle, Everybody's gone. Maybe it was a point of despair, and you have to die in battle. That's part of the thing. That's the old law, to go to heaven, to go to Valhalla. You have to go, and there's a story that says, well, or the Valkyries were coming, the angels or the spirits of to take you to the next world. They were all out there gathering it. Did Brian? We don't know, of course. I mean, they're dead. They can't tell us the story. All we know is they say that here are the two bodies, one with this, one with the other. And, of course, the Normans say, or not the Normans, excuse me, the Nordsmen say that, well, he was killed by Brodar, and the Irish say, yes, he was killed in the battle. And the others say, wait a minute, he won the battle. He was the ultimate winner. But what did he win? He discovered, as you said earlier, he discovered an Ireland that now has an emptiness to it because so many men have been killed. How many thousands were killed in this battle? And there's nothing left, and I'm old. Did he kill himself? We don't know, of course. But it is interesting to see the two theories, that he killed himself or that he was killed by Brodar.
That's right. And when you stop and think, I mean, all the kings, over kings of Munster that were slain that day, and all the sons of all the leaders that were slain, and as they slowly went back, made their way back to the homeland. And one story I was looking at even talked about Brian's grandson. They said he was standing by the river and picking the Vikings off as they fled, but he was found drowned and dead. But he said his hand was clutching the hair of a Viking.
Yes,
like the ultimate
in the river.
Yes, in the river.
In the river,
which would be, of course, where the Vikings were fleeing to.
That's right.
Now, there was also one other statement made that it's interesting that say in the North, they immortalized this battle much more than in the really in the strongholds of Munster. Maybe once or twice they might have immortalized it and made it grander than it was. But this would have been a very sad time for all the people of Munster because their leaders had been slain. There were thousands of people gone, whereas in the North, they decided not to fight that battle. And that, of course, gave them the kingship after Brian was slain, at least for a while.
Well, what happens here is that, how about communication? You know, how does one find? And so I'm leaving the battle. Everything around me is devastation, and I have to go home. What am I going to tell them? Am I going to tell them about the glory that has happened, the greatness that is, or am I going to tell them about the despair that I have encountered? And I think that as legend grows and as the story grows, in one sense, that Brian liked to have a historian around. Put that down there. Write that down. Make sure you get that right. Make sure we have the true record. Well, they wanted Brian Boru, the Ardree. He has to be held in the highest esteem. He has to be seen as the great king of Ireland. And today, we call, the last king of Ireland has to be known in greatness. And so all of those other things. The Vikings were retreating, but yet Brian is dead. His son is dead. The heirs. Where is the heir? What happens to it then becomes created, actually, doesn't it? The O'Brien?
Yeah, O'Brien families, because they named themselves after the most famous man of their clan.
And Brian actually was Brian de Kennedy.
Yeah,
Mac
Kennedy.
Kennedy. And then the O'Brien. See, so it works out who's who, as the Mac being the son of the O being the next generation, or from the grandfather was here or there. How does it all grow, and how does each become? And it's all very fascinating history. I hope we have given some of our students the willingness to go research, to further on what's there. Many legends, many stories, great information. And true or not, it's fascinating to be a part of it.
Well, and what happened after that battle? Boy, who survived it? Well, the old cagey old Viking there, Sihtric, the king of Dublin, he stayed in the city and he lived. He survived. Brian's son, Doncod, led the Munster army home slowly and sadly, I would imagine. And then Brian was buried.
And remember that Doncod, he is Cedric's stepbrother because he's Gormleth's son. So what you have here is the two brothers, though Doncod is much younger, of course.
That's right, and they after a little bit of time, they took Brian to Armagh and buried him there with great ceremony, and the approximate spot is marked today.
Yes, and it's on the grounds of the of St. Patrick's Cathedral of the Church of Ireland.
Well, and then the power of the Dalcassians was severely declined the next decade, and it was either his sons or his grandsons. One of them had the other one killed because they were fighting for the kingship. So it's a story of tragedy there. Power gone wrong at that point, and that all set things up and led the way for the next major point in Irish history, where the Normans would invade Ireland in 1169, and I think they brought another woman out of hiding for that one, and I think they blamed that invasion on her too. But we'll learn more about that in our broadcast, our class, our session on the Norman invasion of Ireland. And I guess just to end it up, we've got to say that this battle was really not for exiling the Norse from Ireland, either before or after it. There weren't enough Vikings in Ireland to actually take the country from Brian. They had to go out and bring them in from all points in the world to do this battle. So if Brian would have lost, it could have changed history for sure. So we have to pay homage for that. It could have been a whole different story. But it wasn't the exiling of the Vikings from Ireland. It was really a battle against those Vikings of Dublin. It was the heart of the matter. And he defeated them and broke their power really forever. But they stayed on, and they became part of the Irish culture, just as we've said earlier in this broadcast. So that's about all I can think of today, except I wanted to just mention for all of my genealogy folks out there talking about the families, you take a quick look. They said the Clan Owen or the Eugenians from County Kerry down there were growing in strength and supplied a lot of men for that battle. Well, if you take a look at the Annals of the Four Masters and Keating's History of Ireland, who were some of the people saying just the second division of Beru's people? And those are the ones from Munster. And you'll see Mahoney, or the ancestor of Mahoney, commanded. And the ancestors of the O'Donohues and Lyons and Moriartys and the Carrolls, the Keneallys, Collins and Donovans, and also the O'Connor Carey and the Dugans and Phelan and the Meagers and Maguire, McNamara, McClancy, the Brians, the O'Days, and of course the children of Kennedy, the Shanahan and Hogan and Lonergan, Kelleher, Maroney and Boland, and there's several more. But this really has been a part of the history, not just for the Irish at large, but particularly for those families that fought alongside Brian. So you got to remember, way back along the line somewhere, your family probably fought in this battle if you were from Munster or even parts of Connaught. And of course, Leinster felt the brunt of the whole thing severely too. That's all I can do on this, Peter. So I'd like to sign off and give it to you.
Well, I think we've looked at a tremendous part of history. We have attempted to merge history and legend, or sometimes myth. Those are a part of what make all things kind of fascinating for us. That's what learning is all about. That is, you have to be able to look through, not only realize the facts, but you have to enjoy it. And when you enjoy the stories, you learn history, and it makes us all better.
So ends this chapter